Hey guys, it's Ajay here, aka Waltzing Wizard, and today it's time for another tutorial. So today we're going to be talking about perfect clear openings. I think the combo opening video that I did last time was a pretty good start to the series of opening videos that I'm going to be doing in my next couple tutorials. And so in a second here, let's jump into it. As my computer lags, wonderful. Alright, so perfect clear openings. So let's just jump right into the pros and cons of perfect clear openings. And of course, we can't really talk about that without getting inspired about perfect clears. Okay, so before we get into the definitive pros and cons, let's just watch one of my favorite examples of perfect clears. So let me just pull up this video real quick. So if you see here, this is the last match between Ajamba and Microblizz during Tetris Tournament Online 5. And in this tournament, it was first to 15 win by 2, so it went to deuce when it got tied up 14 to 14, and then Ajamba's up by 15, and this was the last game that happened here. Let me just turn off the volume. So it starts off, there's the usual Tetris Friends lag. And Ajamba starts off the game with the perfect clear. You can immediately see the big spike that it sends over to Microblizz. And then just like that, Ajamba gets 2 other perfect clears. There's nothing else Microblizz can do. That's, I think, a grand total of 30 lines. Yeah, 33 lines sent, including the combos and stuff in there. And that's just an absurd power output. So coming back to our presentation here. So obviously, one big pro of perfect clears is it sends a large amount of burst garbage over to your opponent. Of course, the matrix of the screen is only 20 tall, and so if you're able to send as much garbage as Ajamba was able to, that's more than a screen and a half worth of garbage that you're sending right in the beginning of the game with that triple perfect clear. This can be a really good pub stomp strategy, so it's really easy to beat beginners because it's hard for them to take advantage of it. We'll talk about how to take advantage of it in a bit. It can also be a strong counter to combo openings because it'll force them to start their combo a lot earlier than they probably feel comfortable starting it. And most players who go for combo openings won't know how to correctly combo into the perfect clear garbage hole. Once they do, it becomes a little bit more problematic, but that also depends on the variant of Tetris that you're playing. Some of the cons of perfect clears is obviously you can't get it every time. I think with perfect play, I've been told you get it 74% of the time. I'm not 100% sure of the stats of that. I feel like I see different numbers in different places, and I'm not overly concerned. Basically, you get it most of the time, but it's not for sure. Then obviously, not everyone's perfect, not even Ajamba. So it can drop even lower if you include misdrops / not being able to see it / to count for a perfect clear. They need to not send you into garbage. So even if you can see it, you might not see it fast enough. And then lastly, as a con, it sends very clean garbage for most variants. I know on Puyo Puyo Tetris it actually spaces out your garbage a little bit when it sends, but on most variants it'll just send all the garbage that the hole is all in one place, and so that can be really easy for your opponents to take advantage of. So this is the generic setup that we have for the perfect clear. There are 2 major parts to this setup. There is the part that consists of the LJ and the O piece, and then there's the part that consists of the T, S, and Z piece. A couple of notes when you're setting this up is that it can be reflected, so my mouse went away, but the T, Z, and S could be on the other side, and that depends on whether you get the S early or the Z early. Obviously, if you get the Z early, you want it to be on the right side here, but if you get the S early, you're not going to be able to place it until the T is already placed, and so it might be beneficial to put it on the other side. The other thing you might have to do is if you get the O piece rather late and you need to already place this this L piece on top, then you can actually rotate this whole structure to the left 90 degrees and have the L piece here, the J piece here, and then you can put the I piece on top. The disadvantage to that is that then you have to use the eyepiece as part of your initial setup, And that actually drops the percentage chance that your perfect clear will work by more than 20%. So you can see here, the percent chance that it works depends slightly on the first piece of the second bag. So this is just how to arrange the first 7 pieces. So the complete first bag. So if the first piece of the second bag is any of these pieces, you can see the percentages change slightly. But as an overall percentage, you can see it drops considerably, especially if the next piece is an O, if you have to use the I piece as a setup. So it's ideal to put the L, J, and O piece in this sort of arrangement so that you have the option not to use the I piece in your initial setup, and you can get something to one of these shapes, or the flip version of it, because then you have a much higher chance of actually being able to complete your perfect clear. So for the first perfect clear, it really is going to come down to practice. I think most of you are going to be able to get the original setup that I talked about in this slide pretty quickly. I keep using my hand to point, but you guys can't actually see that. But getting to this setup is actually, it won't take much practice, but actually doing the first clear is going to take a lot of thought at first, and you just have to do it over and over again until you sort of start to see patterns. The ones that I included on this slide are the ones that when I've done perfect clears, I've noticed tend to come up a lot. Also, when I looked at the stats for each of the clears, these are also one of the higher stats ones. That's not completely in order, but for some reason I tend to see these ones more. There are 840 possible combinations, and so I think it would be ridiculous to try to go through all of them and memorize every possible combination. Instead, you should try to notice the patterns that tend to come up a lot. One thing that I've noticed is S spins and Z spins tend to come up a lot, so you have to make sure you have a thorough understanding of spins and twists, because the last thing you want is to be able to see how to do a perfect clear, but then you don't have the mechanical knowledge to actually execute it. So if you can see in this last one, I included it because if the L piece and the T piece, the J piece and the T piece come early, then the only way to execute this clear is to do a Z spin, which can be difficult if you don't understand spins and twists. I don't want to go over that because that was a separate tutorial that I already did, but the quick version is you have to make sure you rotate it counterclockwise in the air and then counterclockwise again to spin it. If you rotate it clockwise the first time, it's not going to work. So what do you do after the perfect clear? Well, we can see that in the clip that I showed you in the beginning, the last perfect clear is something that you can sometimes get to do, which is the 2-line perfect clear, which is obviously the most efficient way to do it because it's really quick to set up and it immediately sends another 10 lines, or depending on which variant of Tetris you're playing, some variable amount of lines. And this is a pretty straightforward setup to understand. You just use the L, J, I, and 2 O pieces. So this assumes that you didn't use the O piece as part of the initial clear, it assumes that you didn't use any of these pieces in the initial clear, and that the O piece is the next piece in the next bag, assuming that you don't have hold, or if you have hold, it can be the second piece, right? So if you can do that, obviously that's wonderful. If you can't, then you need to categorize the situation you're in into a couple different scenarios. So either the T piece is part of the 3 leftover pieces. So what 3 leftover pieces am I talking about? Let me back up a little bit. So as you can see, all of these openers, use 3 pieces from the next bag. So there's the I piece that's remaining in the previous bag, plus 3 pieces from the other bag. So you're going to have 4 pieces to work with from the second bag in your second perfect clear. So depending on what those 4 pieces are, the 4 piece could possibly include a T piece and either an L or a J, in which case you want to place the T piece vertically in order to maintain the parity of the stack. If there isn't a T piece and both the L and the J are there, then that's also pretty easy to work with because you need the L's and the J's to round out the corners most of the time. If there's no T and there's only an L or a J, then it becomes a little bit harder, and the hardest scenario to work with is if there's no T, L, or J, and so if you use them all if you used all 3 of them in your first perfect clear, and so none of them are in the second bag, then that is the hardest scenario to work with because it's really hard to fill in the corners effectively with the remaining pieces. Once you know which scenario you're in, then you can place those pieces accordingly and then try to fill up the pieces in the third bag in order to create the second perfect clear. I don't think it is reasonable for me to go over each of these scenarios for every single setup because the branching factor of each of these scenarios is so large that it's impossible to memorize them all, and you sort of have to go by feel. If you want to look at all of them, you can look at this wiki. I'll put this wiki in the description below, along with the wiki that I linked in the previous slide that I didn't really talk about much. But knowing the success rates of each of the possible first 3 blocks of the second bag for the first perfect clear, and then this is the wiki for the second perfect clear, the possible second and third bag distributions. But I mean, it's page after page. Like, I put a screenshot here, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. Like, there are hundreds upon hundreds. In fact, it's so big that they didn't even include it in the normal perfect clear article on hard drop because they said that it made the page take too long to load. And so they actually have a separate page just to put all the possible scenarios for the second perfect clear. So I absolutely don't recommend that you try to memorize them all, but maybe look at some of the more probabilistic ones because they have the probability of each scenario next to them, and then you can sort of look at it from there and then notice the patterns. So then what do you do if you can't make a perfect clear? Well, conveniently, so this is why I recommend when you're making a perfect clear, you want the LJO part of the perfect clear on one side, and you want the SZ and T on the other side instead of putting them both on the same side, because this leaves a 3 wide gap in the middle. And for those of you who know how to do an STMB cave, this is actually the ideal way to lead to one, because you need the 3 wide gap in order to start that. So this is something that Yakin does a lot. It's a really clean way to get out of a perfect clear setup, and you've only wasted 1 T block in the setup. If you notice it far enough in advance, then you actually can choose not to place the I piece here or the S piece here, and then you actually end up with a 4 wide combo. If you build in from here and then these 3, then you can end up with a center 4 wide combo, which can be really strong. You can also just go straight into freestyle T-spins and wait till they send you garbage and then transition to the mid game that way. The absolute worst case scenario, if you really can't see a way out, is to just do some center 3 wide, which is obviously not the best setup to go for. It's not super efficient in terms of combos, and then also it's like kind of hard to stack because it's in the center, but you don't get the advantage of not getting topped out because it's not enough in the center since it's a 3 wide and not a 4 wide. So obviously it's not ideal, but I think in the worst case scenario that's what you should do, and just wait for them to send you garbage and immediately try to transition out into a slightly less favorable mid game. I think they'll be at a slight advantage, but you can try to work with what you have from there. So so that's what you should do if you can't get the perfect clear. This picture right here is from another Ajamba match. Ajamba is really the go-to player if you want to learn perfect clears. You just need to watch all of his videos, basically. He's just a master at figuring out how to work them out of like almost every situation and knowing how to follow up with them. But this is a match that he played against Mediabar in... when was it? I think it might have just been an exhibition, actually. I don't think it was an actual tournament. If it was a tournament, it might have been the... no, it wasn't a tournament, actually. It was just an exhibition. But yeah, you can see that he transitioned to an STMB cave. So using the Z piece as an overhang here is a pretty common way to do STMB caves. I don't want to get into how to do STMB caves in this video. I think that's a topic for a different video. But that's definitely something you should look into if you're looking to transition out of your perfect clear setups. Then that's a good one. So that's all for perfect clears. I know that this perfect clears can be kind of frustrating to practice because it just comes down to how fast you can see the setup, and there's no way to like perfectly memorize how to do all of them, because even for the first perfect clear I said there are 840 variations, and then if that's the branching factor, then obviously there's like thousands upon thousands of variations for the second perfect clear. So it's impossible to memorize them all. You just have to get really comfortable with knowing how the pieces fit together, and understanding the parity of your stack and a lot of the other fundamentals to an extreme point of view. So next tutorial, I'm probably going to continue with these openers, because I think getting your openers down early in your Tetris career is probably pretty helpful, so that you never need to think about them very much. TKI 3 is probably one that I'm going to go over. And then DT cannons are always a fun one. And then I want to do a follow-up to the how to play fast video. This is by far my most viewed video on my channel so far. I think a lot of people understand finesse at a high level point of view, but they don't actually know how to go about practicing it. So I might do more of a deep dive into that. And then once again, I just want to leave you with, if you are looking more into perfect clears, you absolutely want to look at Ajamba's videos. He is the king of perfect clears. He popularized it and made other people do it, and yet he's still the best at doing it. That triple perfect clear that I showed you, he's done that multiple times in tournaments. The guy's an absolute monster. So yeah, that's all. Go out there and practice your perfect clears, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.